Benefactor underwriting for this broadcast has been provided by a grant from Republic Bank. The power of red is back. Major underwriting support for this broadcast has been provided by grants from New York Community Bank, M&T Bank, Perfect Building Maintenance, Customers Bank, Collins Building Services, Marc's Paneth. Additional underwriting support has been provided by grants from AmTrust Title, Bank of America, Capital One Bank, Douglaston Development Levine Builders, Flushing Bank, Friedman LLP, Handro Properties LLC, Handler Real Estate Organization, Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, John Catsimatidis Red Apple Group, New Banks, Meridian Capital Group, Ocean First Bank, RPW Group, TD Bank, the One Stop Property Group, and these friends. What's really happening in the restaurant business? Is it really hurting? Is the outdoor dining helping? Where's the revitalization of the business? For that answer, with the help of my executive producer, Mr. Nieporent, we brought together two Michelin star winners, chefs, owners of restaurants, to talk about their business today, the revitalization of the restaurant business. My guests include Marc Forgione, Iron Chef, Restaurant Marc Forgione, Peasant, and KO. And then Scott Tacinelli, who is the chef owner of Don Angie, and also, I would love to say, the creator of the chicken parmesan at Quality Italian that everybody remembers over there. And last but not least, the dean, the godfather, the rabbi of the restaurant business and the hospitality, the one and only Drew Nieporent. Thanks for bringing everybody together. How do you see the market today? Drew?
I'm actually optimistic. I think, given the circumstances, New York City particularly has handled the COVID crisis quite well. And, people do want to go out. And even though we lack some normalcy with tourism, I'm in a neighborhood, Tribeca, which is usually a little sleepy, and we're busy. And certainly the Nobus on 57th Street and the one downtown are spectacularly busy. So I'm very optimistic, Michael.
You know, it's interesting that you talk about Nobu 57th Street being busy all the time, because the office market has not really returned to Midtown. So
yeah, I've heard from my colleagues on 42nd Street, friends of mine who have restaurants, that they're really struggling. So we're on 57th Street. Now, when I drove there yesterday, the streets are pretty empty, but people are finding their way to Nobu. I mean, it's just a terrific brand.
Scott, you're the new kid on the block. How are you seeing the business over there at Don Angie?
I mean, I agree with Drew. It's we're starting to see a lot of people coming back to the restaurant. We're very lucky. The restaurant, won a Michelin star this year, which has helped to bring some new guests into the restaurant that haven't been there. But things are looking good. We have some other struggles, and I'm sure we'll talk about that later. But things, as far as the guests and the business, is starting to come back, and we feel very optimistic, and we feel good about the business, and we're excited to be in New York. We only closed for 2 months, and we're here to stay, so we're really excited.
Marc, where do you see the world?
Well, believe it or not, we had a great summer, and I think to your point, you brought up the fact that offices aren't back, which does directly affect me down in Tribeca as well. But what we're seeing is, and it's been really humbling, and we're so thankful that at Restaurant Marc Forgione, at Peasant, and at Keo, the neighborhood people are just coming out. I think it's not just because they like the restaurants. I think it's also because New Yorkers, when we're faced with a crisis, I've seen a couple of them since I've opened my restaurant. And I noticed that, New Yorkers really want to help New Yorkers. And I think That's why, hearing the other two guys speak as well, I think that there's a lot of support for the restaurant business from the people out there.
What about the fact that tourism isn't back? A good portion of your business over the years has come from tourism, or guests to the city, as Mr. Nieporent and I would say in the past.
Yeah, again, I'll give the same answer. It's just been a really beautiful thing to watch people, New Yorkers, really come out, in groves and support us and be happy to do so. And they mention it when they do come in. Like we're just so happy that you're open. We're so happy that you're busy. We're going to keep coming. And it wasn't just with coming to the restaurants and supporting us, by dining there. I mean, over the course of this year, I've had GoFundMes that raised way more than I thought they would. We've done fundraisers. We had the COVID surcharge on there up until a month ago, which I'm not exaggerating. 95% of the people that came in to eat had no problem paying 10% to the restaurant to help us. And to me, that was one of the most eye-opening things of this whole thing, because we kept it optional. We didn't just put it on the bill. And 95% of the guests said no problem.
What about the outdoor dining? I mean, Drew is talking that Nobu 57th Street, especially with the amount of space, has really done well with the outdoor dining. What effect has it had on Scott and Marc's restaurants? Scott?
We're really lucky. The location of our restaurant is on the corner of Greenwich Avenue and 12th Street with no fire hydrants. So we were able to build a pretty significant outdoor dining. It's really nice to put heating into. We have basically 11 completely sealed off heated booths that were designed by the people that did the restaurant. So it has a feel like you're inside the restaurant. There's music in them, and it's done well. People, it's to the point now that we have 100% indoor dining as well, that we have to really limit it, honestly, because the kitchen's so small that we could never, there's just too many seats now for the restaurant. So we were really lucky that we had all that space. But it's nice. People really enjoy eating outside, and
I just want to say, Scott and Angie, they've done a particularly good job building this outdoor structure. It's very attractive. A lot of structures around New York are ugly and they're makeshift. They're eyesores. But you have a small restaurant, and I would say the outdoor component really actually generated perhaps even more interest. I think people discovered the restaurant in this period, and he's as busy as he's going to be. Now, the most important thing, Michael, and you know this, is the food's great there. The food's great at Marc Forgione's restaurants, and the food's great at my restaurants. And if we still have to provide a bang for the buck, period, end of story. That's the most important thing. If people come, and like Marc said, they're very supportive. Yeah, they're supportive until they get a bad dish. So we have to provide delicious food.
What about labor? How difficult is it for you to get labor today?
Well, I'm going to let the other guys talk about that, but I'll tell you what, that is the worst single element of what we're up against. Because number one, it's the most costly element that we have running a restaurant. It didn't used to be necessarily, food costs factored in, the cost of goods factored in, but now labor, I have one restaurant where the labor is over 50%. So I'll let the boys tackle that.
I'll go first on that one. It's been a challenge, the labor. It's definitely not easy finding cook. And it's the entire restaurant. It's not just cooks. It's, it used to always be cooks. We're always hard to find, but now it's everything. It's servers, it's managers, particularly managers, cooks, dishwashers, really, really tough. We've had to increase wages very significantly, which they were already significantly increased with the wage increase a few years ago. So that's what we're seeing to be the hardest thing, finding people to work in the restaurant industry. So
Marc?
Yeah, it's been beyond challenging. My namesake, the original restaurant Marc Forgione, we've been open for 7 days the entire time that we've been open for the last 14 years. And since COVID, we actually changed it to 5 days a week. And that is directly because of labor. You know, I only have one crew, you know, I only have one chef. And if I was to open 7 days, I'd have to have everybody work 7 days. So we have made that decision to just pack them in as much as we can for those 5 days and give everybody 2 days off. We're closed on Sunday, Monday. Peasant, we just were able to make some hires, and now we're open 6 days. We were doing 5 days there. You know, everybody told me that when September hit that the employment problem was going to happen, but you know, we're just about out of September, and it hasn't gotten much better. You know, people don't realize I actually have the benefit of getting both streets closed on Elizabeth and Reed Street. And, you know, now we have indoor, but when we only had the outdoor, we used to have to carry out, you know, anywhere from 20 to 30 tables with 50 to 60 chairs every single night. And then at the end of the night, after serving, you know, 180, 200 people, the servers and staff would have to bring all these tables back in the doors. I mean, it was like, you know, almost like putting forth like a circus, like in the old cartoons when you would see the circus go up and then they'd take it down and they'd get back in the car and go away. You know, it's been a wild ride. And, you know, everybody's talking about it, but we're hoping that the staffing issue gets better. But I think Drew said it as well. It's been kind of the unsung or untold story of this. You know, it hasn't just been like the indoor dining, outdoor dining, or the restrictions or the closures. Staffing has probably been the #1 issue of this whole entire pandemic.
How important the Restaurant Revitalization Act, how helpful was that? Because I know a number of people in the catering business have not been benefactors.
I got very lucky with restaurant Marc Forgione. Again, we've been there for 14 years, so we were established business. We had established numbers, so we got a great deal of help, which has been amazing and being used for all the right reasons. However, Peasant, I took over in January 2020, so I didn't have any numbers to show.
No past history.
No past history. So, you know, we were kind of left on our own. You know, we did get some help, but you know, not as much as the restaurants that had a history. But
Scott?
On that note, I think the government overall has been really helpful for all of my restaurants.
Yeah, unfortunately, we didn't get anything for that. You know, there's one issue I wanted to talk about that I think is a huge issue, which is kind of like similar to the labor issue, which is the supply chain issue, is also a huge problem.
Right.
Deliveries, supply chain. So, you know, not only can restaurants not get people to work for them, but all of these companies that deliver food can't get people to drive the trucks to deliver the food, which is a huge problem. Getting deliveries at 8 o'clock at night when you need food for a restaurant that opens at 5, it doesn't work. So it's been a real challenge, having to adjust the menu sometimes weekly because, you know, certain things, you know, we use a lot of ingredients from Italy. Certain things we can't get. We can't get, you know, things like 24-month Parmesan Reggiano because they didn't make any, you know, they didn't make any Parmesan for a limited period of time, which has never happened in the history of that, you know. So, you know, it's been a really, that's probably been that, and staffing have been 2 huge challenges for us. Really.
Scott is so right, because the my chef at Batard, you know, is complaining. We're in the middle of service and the delivery is gonna, you know, it's coming after 6 o'clock. I mean, it's nuts.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think it's important, Michael, you know, that we differentiate sometimes between smaller restaurants and larger restaurants. Because, you know, you would think in this time, larger restaurants would have the hardest time because, you know, there's less demand. But the fact is, my restaurants that do this crazy volume, like Nobu, 400 or 500 dinners a night, are doing great. And it's the ones that just sort of do enough, like Tribeca Grill and Batard. We just do enough. I'm not thinking about profit. I'm just thinking about, you know, staying afloat.
When you talk about costs and one of the challenges, how are the landlords treating each one of you with regard to reduction in rent or maybe a percentage rent changing to allow you to survive and grow? Scott, Mark?
My landlord hasn't helped with that. I have a very challenging landlord.
Well, I was just about to say, as much as I would love to talk about that, I'm gonna keep my mouth shut.
I've been in one location for 36 years. So that landlord, I explained, I'm not making any money, I can't pay you, and that was the situation. So unlike these guys, I had a very benevolent landlord there. At Nobu, because we got this PPP money, which you had to spend, we could cover, we could pay the Nobu rent. So, Richard Lefrak, even though we weren't bringing in any business, was not out of pocket.
What do you see as your biggest challenges today in the restaurant business, besides the fact that we were talking about labor, food, getting food from different places, the supply chain? What do you see as the biggest challenges, and what do you see in changes, with protocols? I mean, how many more variants can we have, in all this other situation?
I think we jumped the gun, thinking that the worst was over, which obviously it's not. And there's still, we really can't predict the future with any certainty because there's just too much craziness going on. The vaccinations are a miracle. People should be vaccinated. I made sure that my entire staff was vaccinated. That's the most important thing. What's our challenge? Michael, it's making a profit. So, you used to make a dime on the dollar and you thought that was thin. Now, if you make 5 cents on the dollar, you're lucky. But breaking even sometimes is more realistic because, our costs, the rent, these rents weren't signed yesterday. They were signed years ago. So those rents are very high. Food, as Scott was alluding to, you can't even get it sometimes, very high. And the labor is through the roof. Right now, labor, and that's our biggest cost, obviously, is insane. And by the way, some of us, we were lucky. We had an ongoing restaurant and the staff came back. And that was one of the reasons you were motivated to open. But in some cases, there was nobody coming back. At Batard, my chef decided that he wasn't going to come back. He was my partner as well. So I had to hire a new chef, new general manager, and basically my restaurant, which had been operating in the same location for 36 years, I had one dishwasher from the Dominican Republic come back, and I had one sommelier and one pastry chef, 3 people. So the biggest challenge for me, Michael, was I was literally opening a restaurant that had been around for years. I was opening a brand new restaurant. And you know what? Food was fantastic. We had a huge shakedown period with lots of terrible servers, and but the kitchen maintained pretty well. And today, I'm proud to say, we're doing good.
I'm going to tell you, I spoke to some landlords recently on 3rd Avenue and other places. Many people are opening new restaurants. Maybe some of them are getting percentage rents, there are changes, but there are a large number of new restaurants opening. What's your thoughts about that? Scott?
I just want to point out, Michael, real quick. Anybody who wants to do that, God bless them. But there is still a moment here where you got to sort of assess what you have. And I agree with you. I see Florence Fabricant's New York Times column every Wednesday. And this is opening, and that is opening, and this is opening, and that is opening. And you know what it is, Michael? It's not restaurants like Marc Forgione has. It's not restaurants like Scott Tacinelli has. They're like a lot of these sort of downscale operations.
Quick serve restaurants, QSRs.
Yeah. It's going to be a challenge for them, I think. The one thing you asked about what one of the most difficult challenges is, the challenge I've been finding is a little different. It's, I changed my career. I was sold advertising for almost 10 years. And I changed my career because I loved the food industry so much and I wanted to be a chef. And I've been doing it now for almost 15 years. And, I love being a chef. I love cooking. It's a drive and it's a passion. And that's been a challenge for us recently is keeping the passion with our managers, keeping that passion of the industry. I think people are losing that passion for the industry and keeping them excited because it's been a really challenging time for everybody. And everybody's just completely worn out and people are like, they almost don't want to do it anymore. So that's been a really big challenge is keeping that passion.
I can definitely echo what Scott's talking about. I mean, I know that I just like said to my wife, give or take a month ago, like, I just can't wait to go back to being a chef. You know, because we've been all of a sudden you had to turn into, you know, a problem solver, a psychiatrist, which we always kind of had to be, but it really got times 1,000. You know, businessman, like I said, a circus performer, you know, figuring out all these different things where, you know, the days of just being a chef and a leader and coming up with great dishes and leading a team, you know, it seems almost like another life, to be honest. I can also touch upon opening a new restaurant because we are, believe it or not, actually moving restaurant Marc Forgione down the block because of COVID. Like we're all talking about supply chain and trying to get Parmesan cheese. Imagine now trying to get, you know, a stove. You know, I just found out today that to get a deep fryer, it's going to take till April 2022. I mean, it's like, well, you know, and it's just because the guy who makes the fryer doesn't work anymore in the thing. So, and I was lucky enough, you know, you were mentioning about these leases, and I was lucky enough that I was doing the negotiation kind of in the heart of COVID. And that landlord, God bless him, we were talking about landlords before. And I think the landlords, hopefully, that are signing these new leases are being smart enough to realize that for the first 3 or 4 years, there should be some type of give or take based on sales, you know, with a cap and a bottom and all that kind of stuff, which I think should be the wave of the future if you're signing a new lease. And if you're not, I would be very weary of going into this.
I had no money when I got into the business. And I got into the business, and I like to say I got into the business when you could make money. And the first deal you make is with the landlord. The first deal you make is a real estate deal. And I've signed leases, and I paid what I could afford. But guess what happens, Michael? It just takes one idiot across the street to pay like twice what you're paying. And then they go, oh, the market rent is what that guy's paying.
Yep.
I mean,
you also become you know, at the mercy of your own success. Like the reason that I'm moving is because my current landlord at 134 Reed Street, our lease is now up, and this will now be our third renegotiation. And the last renegotiation, he doubled my rent. So I know what he's going to do now. And when he doubled it last time, he basically just looked at us and said, "You want to move? Go ahead." You know what I mean? And there's nothing you could do. So we're anticipating that he's going to do the same thing at the end of this lease period, which is why we're leaving. So.
See, you're the victim of your own success.
Yeah, it happens.
Literally.
Scott, since you're the new kid on the block and you've been involved with a quality brand, are they opening up new restaurants?
They have a restaurant that is opening. It's a hotel deal in the Pendry Hotel. So it's called Zuzu's. It's like a Middle Eastern type restaurant. I'm not involved with it at all, but and they're actively looking for other stuff, but you know, very cautiously but looking.
Have you changed your menus to adapt to the world we're living in today?
Absolutely. Absolutely. First of all, I said it yesterday to my chef at Nobu. He said, you know, I can't find cooks. I said, why don't you take some items off the menu? And he looked at me and he goes, yeah, well, I did that, but Nobu came to town and he's like, oh, tonight I want to eat lamb chops. And lamb chops, like, are you guys serving lamb? Because lamb has suddenly become a luxury item. Like, you know, a single lamb chop, you'd have to charge $40 for, you know, unless it's frozen and, you know, buried under some mound for a year. I mean, it's nuts. So the answer is yes. The menus, what used to be like 10 apps and 10 entrees was kind of a standard thing. You know, now it's kind of like 5 apps and, you know, literally, because human beings cook the food. So the only way you can save on labor is if you have less items.
Yeah. I mean, we had a period of time where it was almost like in the beginning of the reopening, we'll call it. To Drew's point, you know, we were serving what we could. And at that point, it was probably 4 or 5 apps and, you know, 3 or 4 entrees. We've been lucky enough where we've got our kitchens back to, you know, again, even though it's only 5 days at Restaurant Marc Forgione, we've got our staffing back to where it needs to be, and we've got the menus back to kind of, we'll call it pre-COVID. But it's been, what are we in now? October? And, so it took us 6 months I think we reopened right in March, whatever that is, March, April, May, June, July. So, that's certainly been a challenge, but I will give our guests credit again. Nobody came in and complained that the menus were a little smaller. You know what I mean? They just came in and said, thank you.
But here's what they're going to complain about, Mark. The prices of the restaurants have gone crazy. I was reading an article, and it was saying pasta was $49, $59. And I was like, I thought it was like a joke. So I went on the internet, and I looked up the menu.
Normally, I would go to Wolfgang's on 54th Street. They had a luncheon menu, and they had tuna.
Right.
And I remember the tuna for lunch was like $27. The tuna today for lunch is $42.
There you
Yeah.
go.
Okay.
Yeah, that's not going to change anytime soon.
No.
It's really not.
But I'd like to thank my good friend Drew for bringing in once again Mark, who's the second timer over here, and Scott. And thank you very much. And hopefully my apple, which is a little dull right now, will become very shiny in the future for the restaurant business. And thanks again. See you next week.
Yes.
Thank you, guys.